Ladies and gentlemen, here I have right here is the Coolermaster MM712, a mouse which I honestly don't know what I think about this anymore. Okay, first, let's go over the specs. The length is 116.5 millimeters. The height is 38.3 millimeters. And then the grip width of the mouse is 62.4 millimeters. And then for reference, my hand is 21 by 10 centimeters. What we have here is an ambidextrous shape that is quite unique, and it doesn't really follow any of the trends that we've been seeing so far with other mice. And the best example of the trend setting is the Pulsar X2, which follows a very low front and a high hump towards the back. A lot of mice have been following this kind of trend. And then we have something a little bit more unique for the G303. I'm going to use this mouse more as a reference since this is my main mouse at the moment. But the MM712, what makes this interesting is that, again, as we look at the side profile here, again, it has a low button height and then it kind of has this high back end. So it follows the same side profile that we'd expect from more popular mice. But what sets this apart is the sharp curvature at the very, very back of the mouse, which creates a really nice contact point with your fingers. Just for the TLDR version of this shape, I love it. It's honestly one of the best shapes I've ever graced my hands on. So then why am I saying that this mouse is very confusing for me, and why, in my opinion, I may not actually like this? So first, let's compare this with the Pulsar X2 Mini. Now, the Pulsar X2 Mini is, in my opinion, one of the best fingertip grip shapes out on the market. And if we look at the base profile right here, it's due to the fact that there's very minimal curvature. It's very straight side, so you can really place your hands wherever you want. But for claw grip, you want some definition, you want some curves in there, so you know exactly where to put your fingers, and you have a consistent grip majority of the time. But with fingertip grip, it's always better to just have straighter sides. That way you don't have more cramps. In my personal experience, I find I have less cramps having straighter sides for fingertip grip than I do with curvatures like this one here. But when it comes to again, how I grip the mouse, which is a claw grip, I find that this mouse is very, very narrow. As you can tell, while this is actually technically wider than the MM712, which I'll be popping up a little screenshot of ELO shapes comparing both of these shapes together, you'll notice that it's actually wider, but it feels narrower in the hand because of the lack of curvature that you have. And also the fact that the sides are very straight. So when you pick it up, you feel like you're picking up quite a narrow piece of kit. Whereas with the MM712, if we look at the base, you'll notice it's quite thinner, and it gradually starts to slope upwards as well. So it's thinner at the bottom, that gets wider at the top. This, in my opinion, is what sets this mouse apart and makes this a really, really good shape for me personally. I'm able to get a nice consistent claw grip in comparison to something like a Pulsar X2 Mini, and I have that wiggle room that I'm looking for with smaller mice shapes such as the Pulsar X2 Mini. I'm able to get that wiggle room, but it feels like I got more of a consistent grip, especially towards the back end of the palm. I have more of this area being the point of contact than I do on the Pulsar X2 Mini. However, comparing it to the main mouse that I'm using right now, the G303 Shroud Edition, there is one major flaw. Well, it's not a major flaw actually, it's a major difference between these two mice that makes it much more of a different feeling of grip. Even though something like this is quite similar in terms of the profile and shape, what it's trying to aim for, there is a massive difference with every single mice in this market, right? And we'll use the Pulsar X2 Mini as the start sample. As we can see, the sensor is in the middle of the mouse. Just a tad bit, a little bit to the bottom, but it's mainly directly in the center. The G303 Shroud Edition is a mouse that has a sensor that's more towards the back of the mouse. And then we have the MM712, which, if you haven't noticed already, has a sensor that is far facing forward. Now, originally, I thought I'd really like this. What you'll notice when you have sensors that are much more forward is that the way that you aim kind of changes. And the best way to explain this is that with a forward-placing sensor, if you have a claw grip like I do, you're just essentially aiming more with your fingers. Whereas if it was like with a Pulsar X2 Mini, I'm aiming with essentially the knuckle area towards the center of my palm, and then with the G303 Shroud Edition, it more is aiming with my wrist. In terms of how this feels, you notice that where you curve your movement, for example, as you naturally swipe left to right. It feels a bit more sensitive with this mouse due to how far forward the sensor is in comparison to these other two, with actually the G303 being a bit more further back. I tried to get used to this over the last couple of weeks that I've had this mouse, but unfortunately, I just can never get anything feeling consistent. For me, what I find is that this mouse tends to just feel like I'm over flicking too much. And I always have this feeling that away from other mice that I'm not always able to land my shots onto someone properly because it feels a bit more sensitive than usual. And I tried lowering the sensitivity to try and combat this, but again, it's down to that arch that you have. And because the sensor is a bit more forward, you have to really aim more with your fingers than you do with your whole hand, I guess, in a way. This kind of feeling, I wanted to like, but I just couldn't. I couldn't be consistent with it. I couldn't like it, which is a damn shame. Again, I love this shape. I really do. But with something like the G303, which has a further back-facing sensor, I feel more consistent because I'm having more control with my cursor movement or my crosshair than I would do with the Coolermaster MM712. Now, in terms of the features this mouse has, as you can see, it is quite a very simplistic mouse. The DPI button is at the bottom here with a nice little cover point here to hide your USB receiver, which I think is a nice little change. You also have a way to pair your mouse to Bluetooth, and you can actually switch between Bluetooth, wired, and wireless mode. I'd always recommend going 2.4 gigahertz if you're on Bluetooth. May God have mercy on your soul. Continuing on, the scroll wheel feels really, really nice. I like the definition, but it's still quite light, so I can actually quickly scroll if I wanted to. But at the same time, there is enough defined steps that I can make small little scrolls, and I know exactly where they're going. Not the best scroll wheel, but definitely good enough. The buttons on the mouse are very light. They are using the optical switches provided by Coolermaster themselves. I find they're a bit too light. I would like a little bit more weight personally, but then again, I always prefer slightly heavier switches due to the fact that I'm quite a heavy-handed kind of guy. Side buttons feel pretty decent, although I don't like the design of the side buttons, the pointy nature of them in the center. I would rather they were just flat. And one more thing I don't like about this mouse is this section here. What we have is essentially this bit of the mouse kind of clips into your fingers. So where I grip the mouse, it sometimes grips into my fingers, and I can notice it sometimes. This was a problem that I had when I was using the MM710, and quite honestly, I don't know why they kept it. I really don't. I don't like it. It just makes it feel very awkward. I feel like I have to push my fingers a bit further back to avoid this. I'd rather that they just followed what, you know, Pulsar are doing and other mice companies are doing, that Logitech really push forward, and let's just cover this bit with a ledge. You have more flexibility, in my opinion, and you know, where you can put your fingers, your ring finger, for example. But more importantly, you know, your fingers just don't clip in with the mouse buttons. It feels more comfortable in the hands, and you don't have this little gripe that you're always having to adjust where your fingers are to make it feel the most comfortable. It's the small little gripes that I have with this mouse that really just makes me not want to use it, but at the same time, I really do enjoy the shape. The shape is king, but I also don't like the fact that the sensor is placed forward. That's the biggest attractor for me. It's what's stopping this mouse from basically being a main-worthy mouse, probably being my new main going forward. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have other videos that I've worked on relating to different mice, so you can actually check them out at the very top right corner of the screen. And also click the like button and subscribe. It helps out the channel, and also comment on what else you would like me to review. I've already had someone comments on earphones, but I feel like if you give me more suggestions of what you want to see, I'll be able to try my best to get something down. I've already got another product that I'm really looking forward to coming on its way soon. But other than that, take care, have a beautiful rest of your day, and goodbye.